everyone, wherever you are in the world. I am Paul from the International Indigenous Peoples Movement for Self-Determination and Liberation, IPN SDL1 of the organizing committee of the Global People's Summit. I was just talking to everyone a bit earlier on this big and exciting gathering this coming September 21 to 23 of rural peoples, farmers, workers, indigenous peoples, youth, women, migrants, everyone who is asserting for just, equitable, healthy, and sustainable food systems. So September 21 to 23. And you are here now with us on the public forum on indigenous food systems and indigenous people's rights. So this is a forum, a presentation actually of what happened in a course of 1 month, maybe more than 1 month of consultations and dialogues with our indigenous communities, indigenous organizations, and advocates about the indigenous food systems and their aspirations, their assertions of their rights, on what kind of food system they would like to be in the future and their future generations. We have a lot of our friends here from different country. You will get to hear from them. And before we start, just some of reminders for those who are here in Zoom. For those who just come in, please rename your name here in Zoom with your name and then your organization, and then if you can put in your country, then your pronouns that you would like to be addressed with, so that we can acknowledge you properly later, maybe in the open forum. Also, we would like to request you to keep your microphone on mute so that we will have a clear sound from the speakers, unless you will be called in the open forum later where you can ask your question. We'd like to ask you to turn your microphone off, but you can always turn on your video so we can see each other. And then another reminder would be to use the chat box here in the Zoom in the lower panel for your comments, your inputs, your questions or inquiries, so that make use of it. If you want to greet your friends who are here also in Zoom, please use the chat box. And then for those who would like to listen in Spanish, we have Spanish translation available in the interpretation channel. So, and again, we are live in Facebook, in the Facebook of IPMSDL, the Facebook of ILPS Commission 10, the Facebook of the Global People's Summit on Food Systems, and the Facebook of Katribo. Please like and share. And for those who have Twitter, we are tweeting live our event, and please use our hashtag, join the conversation online. Use the hashtag hungry for change and hashtag our food systems. You can check that out in the chat box of our Zoom. So again, as I've said, this past few months has been very much productive of consultations and dialogues. And now we'd like to hear their sharing, what happened, what did they come up to, what do they want to be part of in the future of the food systems, where do they want to see their communities, where do they want to see the indigenous peoples in addressing the issues of hunger, in addressing the issues of food production, in addressing the many issues and situations of their rights. So we have a lot to listen. So let's start and don't make this take any longer. For our first speaker to share us the results of their consultations and dialogue, we have here from Northeast India, who conducted their initial consultations and dialogue in the past. From the Northeast Affected Area Development Society, let's welcome Tirtha Prasad Saika. Hello, Tirtha.
Hi, Paul. Good evening, everyone. It's a privilege and honor for me to be part of this event. The future of food system is indigenous. We NEEDS Assam, Center for Research and Advocacy Manipur, affected affected citizens of Tista, Sikkim, Borok People's Human Rights Organization, Tripura organized a consultation on indigenous food system in India's Northeast region on 21st August 2021. The consultation is being organized in the context of increased land grabbing, pursuance of unsustainable development, climate change impact, and pursuance of neoliberal policies that promoted commercial agriculture and that undermined indigenous people's food system in India's Northeast. The consultation shows several indigenous representatives from Sikkim, Assam, Tripura, Manipur, and Darjeeling areas of West Bengal sharing the indigenous rights and food system in the region. As major conclusion, the issues affecting indigenous food system in Northeast India are: indigenous food system in Northeast is diversified, sustainable, nature-based, closely linked to the culture and identity and way of life of the indigenous peoples. Unsustainable development intervention like the large dams, such as Mapitel Dam in Manipur, extractive industries in Meghalaya, led to land grabbing and affected food security of indigenous peoples. Dam building has destroyed the indigenous people's land and food system in Sikkim. Series of large dams like Tista 5, Tista 3 already destroyed indigenous land and their food system. Community living in the hills and forests are abandoning traditional jhum and shifting cultivation. The reduced food production and increased reliance on chemical affected indigenous food. Increasingly, organic and traditional food production system is declining. The seed variety is reducing. The traditional seed banking among community members is slowly losing out. Our indigenous food is colonized increasingly, and we are introducing daily food and system. There is increased pursuance of palm oil and rubber plantation coming up, which will further lead to pressure on land and indigenous food system in the entire Northeast region. There is much concern with the increased role of private sector participation in agriculture under the World Bank and other international financial institution funded agribusiness and agriculture competitiveness project in the state of Assam and other parts of Northeast India. Drought and flash flood due to climate change also affected indigenous agriculture in Manipur. 400 rice varieties used to flourish in Assam, but at the moment, hybrid seeds are replacing indigenous seeds. Youths are migrating increasingly out from the Northeast region to the other urban areas for work and education, etc. In the consultation as recommendations and way forward, we came up with the following points, which are like: there is strong need to strengthen the indigenous peoples network, the indigenous way of farming, exchange seeds, and revive indigenous food production system. There is a high need to document indigenous food production system. There is also a strong need to document indigenous people's food system and practices through both academic and non-academic processes. Protection of indigenous seeds through sharing of indigenous seeds and knowledge in Northeast will be a vital step to ensure seed freedom. Indigenous people of the region should have the right to choose the kind of food system appropriate to them as part of asserting food sovereignty. Children and youth need to take important role in promoting our indigenous food system and our culture. And the last point is the control of our land and resources by indigenous peoples is extremely crucial for food sovereignty. So this is the very brief minutes that I came across, we prepared, and that's why we thought of sharing this written document to you. Thank you everyone for your patience. Thank you, Paul, for providing this time to share our concerns from this part of the world. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tirtha. I was able to join the consultation last time, and it was well attended from all over the 8 states of Northeast, and it's really overwhelming actually to listen to these stories, the situation, and their unity, a clear direction for indigenous peoples, for rural communities from Northeast India on the kind of food system beneficial not only to the indigenous peoples in Northeast, but the greater uh, citizens of Northeast who would like to live in a better food system. So thank you so much, Tirta, for your questions. Please feel free to put them in the chat box. Later, we can ask Tirta for that. And then for our second speaker to share uh, on their situation and their demands and calls all the way from Nigeria. We have from the Ogoni Solidarity Forum, Mr. Akpobari Celestine. Hello, Celestine.
Hello, Comrade Paul and other comrades here present. It is our pleasure to be part of today's event. As you are aware, Ogoni is an indigenous ethnic nationality based in the oil-rich but economically disempowered Niger Delta region of Nigeria. Ogoni has been in the news for about 31 years now for the bad reason. Precisely in 1990, as you know, Ken Sarawiwa, that our farmlands, Ogoni that used to be a food basket for the Nigerian society, was no longer able to even feed itself. Ogoni is a predominantly fishing and farming people, could no longer even have the one to eat, not to talk of the one to sell and take care of their family. And as you know, that struggle cost us so much in terms of life, including the very life of Ken Sarawiwa that was executed for doing nothing on the 10th of November 1995. We have sustained that struggle. And one of the causes of that sad scenario is because the multinational oil companies that operate in Ogoni land carry out their activities with reckless abandon. They destroy, it doesn't matter whether it is newly cultivated farms, whether it is farmland that has ripe harvest. If they want to lay their pipeline, if they want to carry out their seismic activity, they remove everything. They can shoot every person in their side. They have the right to call in the military to destroy, shoot, and do anything. They have so overwhelming power. And because we are a small minority group in the country, we are helpless, and that was why we embarked on the struggle. In the last few weeks, we've been consulting. We are part of the consultation. Praise our position to take a look back at where we are coming from, where we are in terms of our struggle and food production. And we observed that there was nothing better to write home about. On the 7th of September, we did a press briefing. We addressed the war, we addressed Nigeria, especially as Nigerian government are planning to resume oil operation in Ogoni. And recently, the president of Nigeria assented to a bill that was passed. It was the Petroleum Industry Bill, but now Petroleum Industry Act, that further punished indigenous people. And so we were resisting that it does not favor us. In fact, the companies that operate within the Ogoni territory pump their chemicals into our river, destroying whatever that was happening. But the good news is that in some part of Ogoni, the land is recovering itself after 31 years. Because as you are aware, we removed share from Ogoni in January 1993. And the land has a way of recovering itself. So from that 1993, some part of our land is fully recuperating and things are beginning to get well. So we don't want further oil production that we, bring us back to where we are coming from, because we want a beautiful future. So what we discussed and agree on to do, one, was that the petroleum industry, the Land Use Act that took away every land in the indigenous community and gave it to the government should be scrapped. We agree that we should pursue, we should launch a serious campaign against the Land Use Act that are taking land from people. All land that belong to indigenous people should be returned to them. And secondly, we also agree that we should resist any attempt to resume oil production in Ogoni land, because we have not benefited from it. Rather, the land has been destroyed and the waters because of that. So we don't want any oil production anymore, and we should resist it. And we are going to do that. And finally, we also agree that we have to resist the Petroleum Industry Act that Mr. President recently signed. We are calling on the President of Nigeria to take back that bill. He should take it back, because that is not pro-people. It is a bill and give it to a few individuals. And that's what I would call a daylight robbery. And we agree that we are going to network with organizations that care about community people and the food system. We should work together, and they add their voices to our struggle in ensuring that the little that we have are not taken away from us, that they are protected. Thank you very much. I think
Thank
my
you.
3 minutes. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Celestine, for giving the highlight of the long battle of the Ogoni people on multinational, transnational companies, Royal Dutch Shell, who have polluted and definitely destroyed the indigenous food systems and food and fish supplies. Thank you so much. If you have everyone who's here who would like to ask questions, you can use the chat box, and later in the open forum you can ask Celestine. Also, for our friends from our journalists or from the media or the press, I believe all our speakers are very much open for interviews. We can send you their email. You can chat with them here in Zoom for follow-up or maybe one-on-one discussion on the issues and the highlight cases that we are discussing tonight. Again, welcome to everyone. We are here on the public forum, the indigenous food system. The future of food systems is indigenous. For our third speaker, we are moving on with our friend from the Kautule, the Karen territory in Burma. We have here our friend Sar Dodomu, the Karen Environmental and Social Action Network, Kasan. Hello there, Dodo.
Hello, Paul. Yeah, thank you, Paul. Can you hear me well?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Okay, good. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. My name is Dodo from Kisen, and an indigenous organization that based in Kautule or Burma. It is an honor to be here, to be a speaker on behalf of our organization and also for the people that I'm working with. And thank you to our colleague at IPMSGL. Yeah, to begin with, when we talk about the indigenous food system, I like to encourage and ask ourselves the 4 questions that I have in mind. The first one is where does the air that we breathe come from? Clean water that we drink come from, and safe and healthy food that we eat come from. And what about shelter? What our shelter bed with? The answer is, we all know that the answer is our nature environment. In our current, indigenous community, our traditional knowledge and culture are closely linked to the nature environment. Our ancestors, teach that we have to live, harmoniously with the environment and the nature. It is a harmonious living. It is based on the interdependency principle of helping and caring for each other. because we share the planet that have an intimate way of life, and we are aware that to be able to survive, to be able to survive and exist in this world, we have to depend on the well-being of this biodiversity and this complex ecosystem. And today, themes on the future of the food system is indigenous. I like to stress that our indigenous food is our cultural identity and then our food sovereignty, our sovereign rights. The system which is based on sustaining the environment and maintaining our biological diversity and ecosystem services. At Keystone, we have a program called Community-Based Livelihood Initiative, and this program is to help increase the food security of a local community by applying and strengthening our indigenous knowledge and practices, which are also critical for climate change, mitigation, adaptation, and resilience, while the industrial farming is a major contributor to climate change. And well, I'd like to share in relation to our indigenous food system, I'd like to share that our goal, which is known as customary land, is the heart of our indigenous food system. It maintains healthy ecology, diverse agroecological system, which in return provide food security and sustainable livelihood to us, to our current people in Burma and Kotuli. In different land uses have been managed and practiced, within core customary land system, and they include upland, rotational farming, because more of our landscape are quite mountainous. And also, we also have a lowland paddy farming and agroforestry orchard, community forest, watershed, fish conservation areas, sacred areas, and other household and communal land uses, such as like schools, religious building, other like healthcare system. Our indigenous food system is a holistically integrated. It's not like a segment like a different piece, different part. Is like integrated in a holistic way, socially, spiritually, and physically. The well-being of one well-being is the other well-being is very fundamental in our like traditional practice. Many of our current belief and rituals are related to agricultural process and preparation. Traditional ceremonies are held before crops are planted and harvest. Spiritually, we have a traditional ceremony called Dalukuteku. We conduct it every before and during the planting season in July, to ask the spirit, to take care of the land, to protect the land, protect the, and also community, provide rice yield for the whole year, so that we have a food security, food productivity is enough for us the whole season. And socially speaking, we also have this kind of traditional practices called Tamadumaka. Tamadumaka is a collective labor system. We help each other, mutual help. It is another critical a traditional practice in our community, and also for our food system as well, because we work together, we help each other, share responsibility in different stages of our agricultural process. Started from like a clearing, selecting the land size, clearing land for our cultivation, planting, and even like harvesting. We help each other. This is this is like a highly and culturally value in our community. And seed exchange is another like a traditional practice, which is also part of our food production system. Is very important for us, because we collect, save, and share the seed with community, within our community, as well as other community within in our boundaries, in the neighbors, with the intention to preserve and also indigenous seeds, and also showing our care for the other well-beings. And traditional sustainable natural resource management, another key factor for our food production system in our culture, because if I can give example like a forest, it is we call that, we have our uncultivated food, medicine, firewood, other resources. And so our ancestors teach us to protect the well-being of the forest and ecosystem, because if we can protect it, if we can protect the well-being and then maintain the well-being of this forest ecosystem, that is going to have a negative impact on us and also for our food production system. Yeah, practicing this traditional knowledge, which is based on the philosophical principle of use, care, and help, is key to our current people food system, our food security, and our food sovereignty. Let me conclude by reciting a traditional poem, which our elders pass on to generation and also the future generation to come. The poem go like this: we who drink water must take care of the water. We who eat from the land must take care of the land. Only when we maintain the balance will our well-being be sustained. This is a very important teaching, oral traditional teaching that our ancestors and also our adults, pass on to generation, that we have to live harmoniously with our environment, with our nature, because their well-being is our well-being. We have to understand that our indigenous knowledge begin with love, care, respect, and gratitude. So that is our shared responsibility to give nature space for regeneration. In our current food production system, diversity and relationship are highly and culturally valued. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Dodo, for that. Not just inspiring, but really moving sharing, because as you have shared, these are actual and project steps the people of Karen are already implementing. And we should take note that all this the people of Karen are doing in the midst of a military dictatorship, in the midst of military coup, strong attacks on the people happening until now, actually. So maybe later, some of our friends would like to ask questions on how these things relate in the food system and the attacks on indigenous communities and attacks on the democratic freedoms of the people. So yeah, and all what Dodo has said actually are also well documented in the consultations and dialogues that we had. Later on, our tech team from the IPMSDL Secretariat will give you the link of all the consultations, actually. The link of all the dialogues where you can access, read, and see for yourself what happened, what's happening on these territories and these countries, all together with their sharing of their victories, good practices, and inspiring stories, and of course their recommendations and calls. So moving on to our next speaker to share on us on their reports on the consultations and dialogues on indigenous food systems from Mopot, Monongolig Poguntoku, and our member of our regional coordinating council, IPMSDL, all the way from Sabah. Let's welcome Atama Katama. Atama?
Thank you very much, Paul. It is really a pleasure to be with all of you today. First of all, I will say Kopi Sunduan, which is a greeting to the spirit in yourself, your person. I just wanted to kick off by saying that we are indigenous and we are one. We are one with the earth, the land. We are one with the plants and fauna, one with animal, fauna, water, hydrosphere, wind, atmosphere, stars, sun, moon, the stellar spaces, the spirits of our ancestors, the humanity in divinity. We are one in divinity, in all humanity. I want to share with you a case from our part of the world, Borneo, where we have had consultations with two territories in Sabah, Malaysia, and in the province of West Kalimantan in Indonesia. So let me kick off with introducing you to a story called the boso. So the boso is a traditional food, and it is vital in the preservation of indigenous people's heritage and culture, as well as for the preservation of food system itself, because 95% of its basic ingredient is obtained by farmers from nature and through organic farming in the interior. I'm talking about in the rural, in the forest, in the rivers, in the mountains. And there are more than 30 ingredients to this Boso traditional food. The way of this food production requires the observation of Tagal and Mitatabang spirit, which is the environmental protection through the traditional knowledge and conservation of indigenous peoples. So when our peoples make this boso, it is not just for consumption, but it is also to be shared with community. And so there is such a flow of income. However, there are issues and challenges to this food called boso because of the large-scale plantation and expansion of monocropping in our part of the world, especially in Sabah. Secondly, because of climate change and the unpredictable weather, floods, drought, and weather inundate the traditional food and its access in the forest. Landfills, for example, the debris from the highlands, which are logged by companies, when the rainfall, the debris, and it fills all our rivers. You can see it in the photo. Other issues and challenges of the Dusun Kadazan community in this part of the world is the difficulty in transporting produce from their villages to the towns due to very, very poor road conditions. This beautiful part of the world was once 90% forest, but now it's only left 25% because of all this human activities, commodities, and extractives. Other problems that we face in Sabah is that villagers live on settlements and on private lands without any grants or titles. They are also prevented from cultivating the lands and the rivers with more independence and freedom. Native land claims are also being overlapped by development projects and land conversions. For example, the Ulu Papar Dam. There is a dam called the Kaiduan Dam. Now it's being called the Papar Dam, and it will inundate up to 6 villages. And these areas in the villages are the prime supply of those ingredients to make this Boso traditional food. And the supply of the food in this particular area is for 3 districts in the west coast of Sabah. So the endless impacts and environmental degradation culminate worse even when the dam project continues and is built. In another area in Sabah, Trusmadi mountain range is a UNESCO biodiversity reserve, but there is a land conflict ongoing right now. So there is a community of indigenous peoples who have ancestral lands at the foot of the mountain, but this mountain is being taken 500 acres of it by a corporation. So the traditional owners, what they did recently is they refused to comply with any order. So they fought back by asserting their native customary right and by going back to this land to farm and to fruit cultivation. And this reverses their fate, even with continual harassment, including mental and spiritual attacks. What I'm told by the community here is the next thing that they will do is perform an animal sacrifice according to our traditions here called the stone atonement, which is to defend their ancestral land by communicating to their ancestral spirits, the spirits of nature, to God, to elemental beings, and to all living creatures that they really want to fight and defend their traditional territory. This is coming from Sabah, but here, the next case is even more critical because our partner in Kalimantan, Chris Heru, he says it is the same struggle and the same fight because the farmers or the Dayak people who are in West Kalimantan find themselves in a myriad of land conflicts with plantations. So he tells me that the Dayak people of Borneo have a philosophy founded on trilogy of cultural civilization as Asian peoples, which is and synonym to all indigenous peoples: respect and obedience to ancestors, respect and obedience to parents, and respect and obedience to a nation. They have also this doctrine which shape their identity through customs, Dayak customary law, the Dayak holy myths and the Dayak holy legends. This makes them, as a character of Dayak, as holders of customs, customary law, myths, and their spirituality. So in West Kalimantan, the Dayak community farming traditions are opening land. They will then clear the trees. They will burn the land and those things that they have chopped up, and then they will start planting and they will treat the plants, and then later they will harvest. In Indonesia, there is basic law for traditional farming. However, during 2019, where the whole of Asia got the worst and largest smog caused by the burning of plantations, sour oil palm plantations land by this corporation, by the hundreds and thousands of acres. Indigenous Dayak farmers were the victim of criminalization. So the farmers, Dayak farmers, were arrested, they were convicted, and they were jailed. But it took one resurfacing of the Dayak tradition of defending the land. So they organized, they mobilized, and they defended those farmers and the traditional farming practices against the law itself. And they freed their people. Yeah, so this is an amazing story of the resilience of the Dayak farmers there, you see. So the recommendations that come from this group in Kalimantan is that performing identification and mitigation of indigenous peoples is very much required now because of the crisis. Secondly, there is a need for synergizing countries and indigenous communities all over the world to speak as one voice, to fight together. We are one, as I said earlier on. And thirdly, is to protect the rights of indigenous peoples and releasing them from criminalized sentences and jail sentences. So if you can see the photos down there, this is the Dayak youth who have returned to their traditional ways, and they call themselves the Pasukan Merah Dayak, or the red traditional guards of the land. So in conclusion, from our report here in Borneo is that indigenous community and peoples are the identity of a nation and a nation state. If indigenous communities are comfortable, if we are comfortable, then the country is safe and harmonious. As I started my presentation by saying that we are one, I am one in spirit with you, you with me, together with the earth and all living things. Indigenous peoples are truly the custodians of the planet because we are the only ones left at this point of time that can mediate climate change. We can speak to our ancestors, perform ceremonies and traditional rites to connect with nature for the well-being of this planet. But however, the struggle is the same and we are still fighting for the same cause. I close with Adil Catalino, Bachuramin Kasaroga, Basengat Ka Jubata. Thank you for this opportunity to share with you.
Terima kasih, Atama. Thank you so much for that sharing. Again, what we are seeing here is a discussion of really delving deep on not only on the relation of the indigenous peoples to their culture, to their land, but how it holistically affect the totality of our environment, of our land and food production. And again, all these reports is very much available on the link in our page. You can check it out. Is it on the chat box already? Yeah, in the chat box, you can visit the reports from our friends. You can see it there. And again, please keep your questions, your comments coming here on the chat box or in our social media. And don't forget to join the discussion on Twitter by using our hashtags hungry for change and hashtag our food systems. Again, you are here on then the future of food system is indigenous, a public forum on the reports of the consultations and dialogues of different indigenous peoples, communities, and organizations. And now we are moving on to our next presenter. From our friends in the Philippines, we have here from the Bai Indigenous Women's Network, Kakay Tolentino, to share on the situations and aspirations and the successes and the results of their many consultations and dialogues actually with rural workers, indigenous farmers, and their demands and calls. Kakay will be sharing in Filipino. So for those who would like to listen it, hear it in English, please you can choose the English listen in the English channel. Okay, Kakay.
Hello, everyone. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Mahabang panahon ang pagsasapraktika
We
ng mga
indigenous peoples have long been practicing our custom, knowledge, and traditions, and these are collectively enriched by indigenous communities still until the present. Tuyuan, Taknungan, Ububo, Bulganay, Dagyao, which is a system of community support work. These are just some of our customs and practices as indigenous communities, which are strengthened by our cooperation and building unities among IP communities. In addition, these indigenous knowledges, customs, and traditions are sturdy systems that ensure our livelihoods, resources, and food, which are the primary foundations of our collective struggle to protect our land, resources, livelihoods, food, and self-determination, which are the basic rights of indigenous peoples as people of peace, freedom, and dignity. In this context, the current situation of ancestral lands and territories of indigenous peoples are changing drastically due to the continued interference, plunder of land, and the environment in general by foreign capitalists through rotten and neoliberal policies, laws, projects, and programs, which are advanced under the economic framework and platform of the Build, 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 and the so-called Plant, 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 in the name of ensuring sustainable food systems, but through foreign capitalist corporations' interests and notions. Indigenous peoples know that even in the time of the pandemic, the implementation of projects under the Build, Build, Build are continuing, such as the construction of the Chico River Project irrigation pump, the Ginad Kabuga Dam in the Cordillera region in northern Luzon, the Kaliwa Kanan Laiban Dam in the Sierra Madre Mountain Range, the New Clark City in central Luzon, the Halaul River Multi-Purpose Project in Panay Island, the Pulangi 4 hydroelectric power plant in Mindanao, as well as corporate mining and plantation. All of these are built on the ancestral lands and territories of IPs. These are brazen attacks on the basic rights of IPs, the right to ancestral lands and self-determination, a systematic plunder of ancestral lands and natural resources found in indigenous territories. The Duterte government has shown and made us feel their lack of consideration for any meaningful COVID-19 pandemic response among indigenous peoples, and the lack of a systematic plan for economic support and aid to address the present hunger that is spreading in indigenous communities. Added to all these is the spread of the Delta variant, which further exposed the excessive poverty and is worsened by militarist lockdowns, along with the implementation of the National Task Force to End Local Communist Armed Conflict, whose central target are indigenous peoples that bravely voice out their opposition to anti-IP projects, laws, and policies which directly violate the right to self-determination. Instead of responding to the need of saving the national minorities from hunger due to the pandemic, the Duterte government instead has implemented brazen massacres, killings, red tagging, and the release of permits for the continued operation of foreign mining, the construction of dams, the expansion of foreign plantations, and other infrastructure projects that plunder and land grab widespread ancestral land resources in national minorities territory. Over 100 have been killed and massacred. On December 30, 2020, 9 Tumandok indigenous peoples were massacred. March 9 was a bloody Sunday, where 2 Dumagat were killed. June 21, 2021, the Lianga massacre, where 3 were killed, 1 Lumad school student, 1 indigenous youth, and 1 indigenous farmer. There are other extrajudicial killings and 6 incidents of frustrated JKs of indigenous peoples in Ano. The indigenous Lumad are continuing to evacuate amid attacks and raids against their Lumad public schools and UCCP Haran in Davao City and in Cebu City. There are legal searches, arrests, and detention due to trumped up charges. The worst is how 2 indigenous Aita were charged under the Anti-Terrorism Act. There is red tagging of indigenous peoples organizations. Worse is the unjust administrative order of the National Commission on Indigenous Peoples in order to displace the indigenous Lumad, Mandok, and Igorot. For indigenous peoples and indigenous women, this is not the ideal situation of our communities. All these is contrary to our knowledge, our ideals, aspirations as indigenous peoples, whose sustainable system of food are based on the fruits of Mother Nature and the farming practices of indigenous communities, which provide food for all. We, the indigenous peoples, demand and call for the following. First, acknowledge, respect our indigenous knowledge, customs, cultures, and practices, which give importance for a long time in history. Our strong ability to ensure safe and bountiful food for many people and not just a few. Let us support the initiatives of our indigenous community to achieve food for all and also the development of our food system. We strongly and firmly call to end the development aggression forwarded by the Duterte government, which only destroys nature, displays indigenous communities from their communities, lands, and territories, and the military operations in the countryside. Struggle and fight for the basic rights of women, children, youth, indigenous peoples, for land, resources, food, livelihoods, and self-determination. Defend and fight for our ancestral domain. Thank you very much.
Thank you
Thank you, Paul. Allow me to say greetings to you in my indigenous language. Natep ngaminke bulo ngaminke Aida Gonglia. Greetings to all of you. That's my indigenous language from the south part of West Papua. I'm from Malin tribe, and in West Papua, our territory is one of the most affected place from the bigger development project on agriculture industry, and that's why I think this is a good opportunity for me also to share the story of my people and also the story of West Papuan people. When we talk about West Papuan and the food sovereignty, we can't deny the history of that, because West Papua, in terms of the culture, we are Melanesian, so we share the same land with Papua New Guinean people. So West Papua is located in the most eastern part of Indonesia, and we became part of Indonesia in 1969 after very unfair political referendum during that time under the UN assistance. But unfortunately, the process was not fair. So we always, West Papuan always feel like we are being forced to be part of Indonesia without a proper political process. So until now, when we talk about food sovereignty, we talk about indigenous people's right to self-determination. We can't separate it from the long struggle for self-determination to West Papuan people. And when we talk about self-determination, we talk about everything, because self-determination is a right of people, and even indigenous people have a right to make a decision about their future, about what they want to do with their land, their resources. And very unfortunate, since 1969, when we were occupied or annexed by the Indonesian into their territory, it started with a very huge development project called transmigration under the rule of military general Suharto. And the transmigration is basically a food project. It's funded by World Bank, and the program is to send people, especially the poor people who are living in the poverty in Java Island, to other part of Indonesia and in other islands. And it's not only happen in West Papua, but it's also in Sumatra and Kalimantan. So we can understand how our brothers and sisters in Sumatra, and especially Dayak people in Kalimantan, how they struggle with that big plantation project, because it's already happened since 1970s to 1980s, and many of the indigenous people lost their land because of this project. And for West Papua case, it's continue until today, and even though it's not called as transmigration, but it's part of the development plan, national development plan. And the national development plan for Indonesia right now is very capitalist oriented, because everything related to the natural resources should be exploited, and it's very clear that through the policy of the government, for example, the recent one, which is the omnibus law, the law that allow investment, bigger investment in Indonesia, and that's also affect a lot of indigenous people in Indonesia provinces, and also in particular in West Papua. And since West Papua is very rich island with the natural forest and minings and also other resources, so the project is the development project is targeted massive land owned by indigenous people, because we are not registering our land, because the land belongs to the community. So for the government perspective, they thought that it's an empty land. No one it's no one owned the land, so that's why they said it's unproductive land, so it needs to be developed as a agriculture project. And that exactly where we lost our food stocks and food security, because the forest is the place for us to do hunting, harvesting, fishing, and it's also in the coastal area, the connection between the river and the ocean. Everything is for the food, and we have the food system. And people have, in our indigenous knowledge, we have a time to harvest, a time to gardening, a time to go for fishing, and everything is perfect. But then through the new system came and it changed and almost everything until now. So in this situation right now, when the government is trying to push the investment happening in West Papua, they use the military force. They use that military force to protect the area that they thought is very rich of resources, and especially in the highland area when we have mineral, very rich mineral like gold. And at the moment, we have thousands of people become an internal displaced persons because of the conflict that created by the military to the indigenous people, especially with the political movement, freedom movement. It creates a conflict, and it makes people have to run out and find a good, safe place. And it's already thousands of people, and nothing happened. No special attention from the government. Instead, they let the military operations ongoing. And this situation creates a difficult situation for our people, because there is no food in a jungle where the place is very difficult, and many of children's dying and have malnutrition because of this situation. And at the moment, the focus of the government is only to target some villages, some indigenous areas to get the peoples out of the place, and then they can occupy the land, and then they will start to do the operation for mining. And it's not a secret that in Indonesia, especially in West Papua, all the projects related to the natural resources investment, it's all related to the military business. So we can't, indigenous people can't really stop. Even human rights organizations and environmental organizations trying hard to advocate this issue, but unfortunately it seems like we just hit the wall. So we need more solidarity from people, and especially indigenous people around the world, and especially for indigenous people from other provinces and islands in Indonesia, because we are facing the similar kind of actors. We face the same law, and they want to occupy our land and to take all the resources we have. And very unfortunate situation is where the food bank for us being taken away and replaced by the oil palm plantation, which is very, very sad, because that's our food. And what happened in Borneo, in Sarawak, and it's just the similar situation we're facing, and they are the same companies, same actors. So I think it would be better also to have like this kind of connection to find who are behind all of this, the big industries who are coming and taking our land, especially oil palm plantation is one big threat to the indigenous people's life and food security. And for us, we can't go and fishing in a river that already polluted by all these chemical things that came from the palm oil plantation. So people have to go away far from their village just to find the food or to garden. So this is a kind of threatening situation, and especially with the military present backing up all this big business under the name of development. I think this is a big threat now. So we want to have at least government could stop all the military operations and having a good conversation and dialogue with the people, just to allow people to go back to their village and enjoy their life. And if they want to come with the investment, that should be a free, prior, informed consent, because in many of our process, it's just ignoring the voice of the indigenous people and the voice of the land, the owner of the land. And we especially in my generation, we lost a lot from our cultural practice, because for almost 50 years, more than 50 years now, that we are kind of have to be act and behave like other people's culture. So our identity is slowly dying out, and it's only about our skin and hair that you can see us as a West Papuan. But in terms of our identity, we can't really present ourselves as who we are. So I want to close my presentation here, and I just want to say thank you, Ada Gonglia. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Rosa, Kaka Rosa, for that sharing. And as you have said, the issue of displacement, internally displaced people, directly impacts on how indigenous peoples or communities from the rural, from the mountains and the forest affects their access to food. Okay, so again, all this sharing is available. You can access the consultation papers, the discussions, many of the questions. Actually, many of the questions that are typed in here in the chat, of course, we will try to still answer them now, but a lot of them has been discussed in full and in very much colorful stories and narratives in the reports, consultations, and dialogue. So I force everyone, I request everyone, and I encourage everyone to please check on the link and check on the beautiful stories and narratives from our consultations. And if you have any additions, comments, or questions to those, please send it to us on IPMSDL. Actually, this consultation is not finished. It's a continuing discussion with many of our indigenous communities, local communities, indigenous peoples all over the world. So to give us the key recommendations and call to actions, a summary of the different call to actions and calls of different communities. We have here the global coordinator of IPM-SDL, Beverly Longy, to share with us the recommendation call to actions of indigenous peoples on the right food sovereignty, indigenous food systems. Beverly?
Thank you very much, Paul, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of us who are here, especially our brothers and sisters speaking from different parts of the globe. I'll try to summarize the results, but this will also be posted in our website and shared with you, and hopefully we can comment on it so that we can further enhance it in time for us to make a formal or official submission to the Global People's Summit that will be happening simultaneously with the UN Food Systems Summit. So here are 10 major recommendations coming from the different country and local workshops and consultations. One will be recognize the rights of indigenous peoples to land and self-determination, to own, self-govern, manage and control our lands, waters, and resources to achieve a genuinely pro-people food system. Under this recommendation is our call to push for policies that will enable indigenous peoples to assert land tenure and governance, build grassroots strength through community organizing as the core of all our work. And this would also include networking, good cooperation, and revitalizing indigenous institutions. And third will be ensure and protect the exercise of indigenous people's rights and freedoms, right to adequate and appropriate social services such as education and health. Number two, major recommendation will be to repeal neoliberal laws and policies of the World Trade Organization, World Bank, and the International Monetary Fund, WTO, World Bank, and IMF that destroy local food systems of the rural and indigenous people sectors. Under this recommendation is the call to stop negotiations on bilateral and multilateral trade agreements that weaken domestic standards related to indigenous food systems, local agricultural production, livestock and fisheries. And this would also include the stop of transmigration policies to indigenous peoples' territories to facilitate land grabbing of indigenous peoples' lands and destruction of indigenous food systems. Third major recommendation is in relation to ending militarization of indigenous peoples' communities, and under these are the calls to pull out state security forces and let us live in peace. Two, investigate and hold accountable all state security forces for their violations of human rights of indigenous peoples. Three, push for genuine and inclusive dialogues for peace and political stability through peace negotiations. And the fourth under this will be to address issues of instability or the root causes of instability affecting indigenous peoples. The fourth recommendation, we have classified under stop the plunder of ancestral lands that also destroys the environment and forests, indigenous food systems, and drive conflicts among the people. Under this recommendation are two major calls. One would be to stop mega dumps and energy projects, large-scale destructive mines and oil exploitation, and other extractives in indigenous peoples' lands, territories, and waters. Stop infrastructure projects and other forms of land conversion, logging, monocrop plantations, and agribusinesses. Two will be to no to the entry of multinational and transnational corporations in indigenous peoples' lands and territories, and projects funded by international financial institutions that facilitate land grabbing and destruction of indigenous food systems. The fifth major recommendation has something to do with strengthening community governance and institutions against corporate capture of land and food systems. Major calls under this will be to scrap the policies that provide financial incentives to the private sector and undermine the people's access, especially indigenous peoples, to public funds and technical assistance. And of course, to support the alternatives of the people or indigenous communities. Stop providing the legal, fiscal, and other incentives for commodity chains or big businesses and unsustainable livestock production, monocrop plantations, and corporate agribusinesses, and then to strengthen legal support, awareness raising, and taking of legal action against companies to defend our lands and also to seek for compensation. The sixth major recommendation deals with reviving and strengthening indigenous practices in agriculture, food production, and preservation, including distribution and consumption. So under these are calls to end or repeal all laws and policies that criminalize and penalize the practice of indigenous food systems and agricultural practices. This also calls for serious attention and support for the vision and intention of developing indigenous food systems, and then the support to traditional community livelihoods and well-being through initiatives that enable community governance and natural resource management, and the assertion of the right to choose appropriate food systems and food sovereignty for indigenous peoples, and as mentioned by all of our speakers, to document and launch researches on indigenous food production systems and practices. The seventh major recommendation will be to protect traditional community environmental conservation practices and to promote natural ecosystem and habitat regeneration. Under this is the call to ensure the access of indigenous peoples to our ancestral lands, rivers, and forests, and to support and enhance our small, sustainable agricultural practices. This would also include the recognition and support of territories and areas conserved by indigenous peoples and their traditional knowledge on climate change, mitigation, and adaptation. The eighth major recommendation, also mentioned by many, will be the protection and promotion of indigenous seeds through knowledge sharing, exchange, and supporting the creation of indigenous seed banks. And then the last, number 9, will also be to recommendation will be to emphasize the role of indigenous women in decision making, protecting and regaining traditional knowledge, traditions, and capacities, and also supporting or recognizing also the role of indigenous youth in terms of what they call this, passing on these positive indigenous practices. Last but not the least, that has also been stressed by all of our speakers, is the strengthening and continuously building of solidarity links among indigenous peoples and between indigenous peoples and other sectors and groups in society who are similarly oppressed and exploited or suffering from state policies and neoliberal policies. So these are the 10 major recommendations and calls, and we hope that we can still comment on this in the next 2 days before to capture everything that has been mentioned in the country workshops and forum. And thank you very much. And back to you, Paul.
Thank you so much, Bev. And those are some of the major and key recommendations from the series of consultations and dialogues that we have. Again, we would like you to access it, share it to our friends, to everyone, and stand with us. Join us and in these contributions to the upcoming Global People Summit on Food Systems, September 21 to 23. Don't forget to register now and reserve your slots. We want you to see there together with hundreds, thousands of indigenous communities, rural communities all over the world in our assertion for our right to food sovereignty. So yeah, and now we are going to the meaty part, the juicy part of our discussion. So let our speakers to answer some of the questions. Some of the questions have already been answered in the chat. And now we'll just go to the questions, some of the questions that have not been addressed yet. I think I would the first question is addressed to, I think this is addressed to Dodo, to Rosa, and Kakay. The question is, in many places of the world, democracy is under attack. How could indigenous people in some regions of the world where they are being denied access to communicate their message to the government and the public? I mean, how could they work on this, and maybe in relation to what you have shared earlier? Should we start with Kakay, and then Rosa, and then Dodo?
As we indigenous women, we always assert our rights to be connected in all levels and venues in the society. So as we have the organizations and all the networks, we maximize our advocacy to amplify our issues from the communities, and also to build alliances and networks among the people who are willing to be with us in our struggle.
Okay, thank you so much, Kakay. Rosa, in times where democracy is being attacked, I know you experience this. How are indigenous people working, doing their work in the food systems for their rights?
Yeah, I think for us in West Papua, because the space to express our opinion publicly is always being suppressed, so we have to be creative and find a way through many ways. Many of our activists organize peaceful demonstration, go march on the street, and raise the issues. And then also many of our indigenous peoples organize themselves under the customary council, so then their message can be delivered to the authorities. But in this situation, even the human rights NGOs and churches, also environmental NGOs, work together hand by with the indigenous people. However, our big problem is the military operation. So everything is militarized. So sometimes we feel like, as I said, we hit the wall. Like we raise our voice more than we can, but then we hit the wall. So we also need a solidarity. We can be stronger if we also have a solidarity from other indigenous people struggle as well. But what we can do now right now is try to use anything. For example, social medias, people posting a lot of information about the destruction of the environment and any kind of atrocity we have here. And many of the young people is more creative. They documenting, make the film documentary about the situation of people. Even started to documenting the way our indigenous peoples produce the food, serve the food, reserve the food. So this is a kind of source of knowledge that we can use also to open our space and to have our own internal dialogue and tell the public, tell the state that no matter what you do, we can still survive. So I think freedom of expression is a big issue in the Indonesian as a state where they say that it's democratic country, but in fact that it's not democratic because you don't have a space to speak your mind. Anything against the state policy means you against the state, so you will go to the to the court or jail because you're against the state. And but it becomes a kind of part of our daily spirit that we need to fight. We can't just stop and say giving up, but that's the way. So keep the spirit alive with anything you can do. I think that's
Okay,
the best way. Yeah.
thank you so much, Rosa. Dodo, keeping the spirit alive.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah. Thanks, Rosa, and then others. Yeah, in our situation, we all know that Burma, or Myanmar, there was a coup, stage in February, and then, but before that, our Korean people and other indigenous and other ethnicity, we have experienced this military dictatorship for over 70 years. So we have to understand that it is not like a very short time, just starting in February. Thing is 70 years. We have experienced these atrocities, the oppression, the exploitation of our indigenous rights. But one thing that I need to share with you here is our indigenous people, we have a resilient mindset. 70 years, we stay here, we stay maintain our tradition, we stay maintain our culture, our land, even though we have been disturbed by this power hungry military, but we are still survive. We still survive, and then we still strengthen ourselves, by networking with you at the national level, at the regional, at the international level. So yeah, as Rosa mentioned, we also use media at our advocacy, to spread our voices, our concerns to the world, to build our solidarity with other people, So indeed, we face many challenges, right now, in terms of like freedom of movement, freedom of expression, like even our land has been like occupied by the military present, the Burmese military, but we still resisted, we try to build, that kind of like a resilient mindset, defend ourselves, defend our territory, because if we are, if it's like a disconnected, from our land, we know that it's going to like negatively impact our traditional knowledge and our practices, which will also impact our food system. So it is very important that, like we are still like close attached to our land, to our, territories. And at the same time, also have to defend ourselves in different means, and also like build a network, at the national, at the international level, so that like we can help each other to raise, the voice of indigenous people around the world, and also help each other in advocating for each like causes. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Kakay, Rosa, and Dodo. Indigenous peoples from different countries, speaking of the same struggle, it saddens us because we are under a common fascist, common repressive regimes, but it also inspires us because we know we're not just doing it here in our country, but it's inspiring to see how indigenous peoples from other territories, countries are, as Dodo said, staying here after decades, many years of challenges. Okay, for the next question, it's about modernization and preservation of culture. But maybe I think we should first clarify on how, because as if you can see on the reports of consultations and dialogues, indigenous peoples do not they do not resist modernization. They actually want to develop their practices. They are developing. They have improved their practices for the benefit of the community. But for the sake of the question, maybe a form of destructive modernization. How does this modernization go hand in hand with the preservation of the culture, indigenous food systems, and the traditions? How do you see this, and how can they go together? Maybe we can start with our initial speakers, Tirta, and then Celestine, and then our other speaker, Atama, and then the other speakers that we had. Modernization and how does it help? How do we deal with it in preserving our indigenous food systems, our land, our culture? Shall we go with Celestine first, and then Tirta, and then Atama?
Well, greetings from here. Modernization has done the Ogoni people more harm than good. I've done a lot of harm because I grew up having Ogoni languages taught in our schools. But as we speak, Ogonis of the age of 30 years, that is when our struggle started, can no longer write in Ogoni dialect. They can no longer write or read in our local dialect. In our churches, before now, we used to read our Bible in Ogoni dialect. But the younger generation now, our children, I have children, I try as much as possible to speak my local dialect in the homes for them to speak, but our language is fast disappearing, our dialect is disappearing. Our culture, that one is, they have tagged it barbaric. In the name of modernization, they say, oh, that is antiquated. That is it's Stone Age culture. So these new children that are coming out because they embrace modernization, if you are doing anything, they say, hey, that is old school, please, that's old school. They don't, if we don't take time, we'll be losing our local dialect, our culture, our way of life, and everything that we have. We'll be losing them. And when they come, unfortunately, they wear the face of development. They tell you lies, but as soon as you allow them to step in, the first thing they do is to divide the people. So you have divide and rule. It's a critical weapon in their hands. They use all the time. They look at the vocal voices in the community, get them. And that oftentimes had led to conflict. Conflict that has taken lives, that caused the young people to burn houses of what a passive opponent. They create that kind of division and enmity in the mind of people against this man does not like you, this one does not like you. But while the two brothers are fighting, they are taking the resources away. And they use that as a diversion. So, and I look back, after over 6 decades now of what I call oil theft in Ogoni. Oil is the mainstay of Nigerian economy. Oil has developed some parts of Nigeria, but the very indigenous community where the resources are taken from are still in darkness. The little road that they create in the community, snaky track roads, is only where their trucks will pass to go and take the resources. You have two countries in one community. The area where they stay, where the fence run, have 24-hour electricity, have good pipe and water. The community people go to the gate to go and beg for the water. They call the riot policemen to shoot them. So, modernization has done us far more harm than good. Before modernization, Ogoni people were self-sufficient. We were, like I said, a food basket. We could feed ourselves and give to outsiders. But today, modernization has brought hunger to us, because in course of extracting our resources in the name of modernization, we have lost our arable lands. We have our rivers polluted. Our air has been polluted. People die. There are high mortality rate now because people are inhaling poison into their system in the name of modernization of the foams that they emit in the course of doing their, and some of their seismic attack on our land. So all these stories are evil stories. Ken Saro-Wiwa is one of the most brilliant Nigerians. He would have been alive today, if not for modernization. So I can go on and on and on and on, but they are all bad stories to us. I think we will prepare to go back to where we are coming from.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for that, Celestine. Tirta, do you want to add to that?
Yes, Paul, thank you for this opportunity again. Yes, sometimes modernization, it brings a radical transformation in our life. Modernization is closely associated with LPG, the liberalization, privatization, and globalization. And it is mostly triggered by the free trade agreement. It brings clashes with the tradition sometimes, modernization, and many a times we see harming the existing practices and the traditional knowledge. And we all know, like in our own region in northeast part of India, slowly the imported foods, which is actually the result of the modernization or the free trade agreement or the foreign direct investment in the food sector, the existing practices of consuming food is radically changed, starting from the breakfast or in our day-to-day life. Many of the existing practices are getting diluted, which is one of the negative side of the modernization. So like we should say, like, of course, there is there are little benefit of modernization in the food system, but it is damaging more. That is one of the serious concerns I would like to raise. It is damaging the environment. It is damaging the whole existing practices and also the sustainable food system in the region. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tirta. Atama?
Well, I think for me and the colleagues that we have consulted thoroughly, and we've actually had built very strong relations with our brothers and sisters indigenous peoples of Indonesia, particularly the Dayak of Kalimantan, where we have forged special relations through culture, through also using and tapping into modern technologies such as, just like this Zoom. We connect all the time. We are on Facebook. We are exchanging notes on WhatsApp. These are tools of communications that have given also opportunity to close the gap in terms of the communication. But on communication itself, our young people are demanding it. Where there are students, university students who are IPs, who are living in very remote areas without any telecommunications. They have to really show and protest. And by doing it in a creative way, I want to share a case of this young lady who was sitting her exams on the treetop. She built a tent and she lived there for 1 week, and that got international attention. And immediately the federal government of Malaysia authorized development plan to bring telecommunication tower, and that is very basic for a modern country like Malaysia. Malaysia is the top 7 achiever of the Millennium Development Goals. It says that it has cured poverty, but that example of that student having to display it in that manner really speaks otherwise. Another example of how technology and sciences, particularly in the popular culture, through tourism, for example, indigenous peoples here find a way to tap into the market. We have a traditional food called sinalau bakas, which is smoked wild boar. It is now available at the stalls on the way to the most important tourism site of our sacred mountain, Kinabalu. And hordes of buses stopped by there because it was demanded by the community. People have to try our traditional food, and tapping into the modern economy of tourism is also one good way. Another trend which is coming through, and I'm sure it also resonates in all our peoples, is that the usage of TikTok by the youth. We are dancing, we are singing in our mother tongue, we are expressing ourselves, we are creating jokes, and that really connects us together, especially those who speak the same language. Also, for example, modernization of arts. It allows us to use technology to create modern music in our traditional arrangement, melody. So we are actually able to use technology and enhance it for ourselves and for us to really get attention, if not use it as our advantage. But there are also a lot of disadvantages to technology, where developing countries and territories, for example, in Malaysia, the largest development of technology is in West Malaysia, and then it is through the natural resources of Sabah and Sarawak, of our oil and gas, the lands that was captured by oil palm plantation. All this money goes to the developing cities, and it doesn't come back to the rural unless we demand it. So we use democratic means in the modern way as well to tap into this. I'd say it is also pro and it is also con. I understand the very, very devastating effect of technology, because it can be used against us. They can track where we are. They know what we are talking about. This kind of thing. So it goes to that aspect as well. So I would say it's 50-50. As a young person, as a musician as well, to me, it's a advantage and also disadvantage. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Tama. Kakai or Dodo or Rosa, if you want to add anything shortly so that we can move on, or if not, we can move on to the next.
For us, modernization is good if it is based on the needs of the indigenous peoples. But if But if it is based on the interests of the foreign capitalists, it is blatantly no with the modernization.
Okay. Thank you, Kakay. Rosa, Dodo?
Yes, for us, I think modernization is okay, it's important, but we have to have a questions about for whom the modernization is will be, especially in terms of development. What kind of perspective of development and modernization can be brought into the indigenous community? Because we also need technology, and people are developed. You know, we need to use technology for the benefit of us, but then we should be the one who decide which one we want to use for the benefit of us.
Okay, thank you. Dodo?
Yeah, from our experience, like modernization or development, it's important that who's going to define it, is who's going to define what development for whom, is from our experience, like it's very top down, like very centralized, and everything is from the like external like factors like the corporate, multinational, the intention like to extract all our natural resources and then try to like really impact us. But I like to share with you that like development, we need that, we need that, but it has to be community driven, community defined. We need to come up with alternative, in this like a more modern world. For example, like in a situation, the Salem Peace Park, some of you might have heard about it. Like a community themselves, like define the development that they want. They lay down 3 goals. One is like peace and self-determination and environmental integrity, and then the third one is cultural revitalization. The things like I like to emphasize here is like the development supposed to be in our hands, not from the external factors, like from the the very centralized government, or not the corporate, yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Dodo. And shortly, Beverly?
Thank you, Paul. I do agree with what our speakers have mentioned. I think it will be a question of perspective, for whom and for what, and what's the objective. But I just like to flag that we in IPM-SDL will be in partnership with the Asia Young Indigenous Peoples Network, and part of this partnership would include the revitalization of indigenous people's culture, as part of the wider campaign of defense of land, territories, waters, ways of life, and identity. Very, very, very interesting discussion. Maybe, Paul, we can have another webinar in relation to
Definitely.
modernization. Maybe it's not a question of modernization, but it's also a question of culture. I mean, because definitely even within indigenous culture, there are things that probably we also have to do away with. And there are many positive aspects of indigenous culture, like sustainable development, that should be not only preserved, but actually enhanced. So I end it with that. Thanks, Paul.
Thank you so much, Bev. Definitely, this is not the last. We're just, it's like we're just starting, opening the discussions, the narratives, and definitely we would like everyone who's here to come with us together and discuss this intersecting stories, food and culture, and modernization and development, and the schools and the youth and the women, and as Beverly said, and the support of our future generation. So from this question, I would have to segue and maybe raise this last question, because we're a bit of over time because of the very, very much rich discussion. It's a good overtime. So the question would be, it's here in the chat, but very shortly, what do you think, how, or your experience and the role of women and youth in indigenous food system? And then lastly, you can answer it together. And lastly, how do you envision, how do you see a future the food systems, indigenous food systems? Because our topic is the future of food system is indigenous. So for you, how do you envision a future of food system that is just to and equitable and safe for indigenous peoples and the people in general? So those two questions you can answer it together, and then and then after that we will have to say close our event for now. So maybe we can start with Celestine, and then Tirta, and then Atama, and then the rest of the speakers.
Well, in Ogoni and Nigeria, where I come from, the youth and the women are very energetic people, and there will be nothing like food production without the energy of the women and the youth. In fact, the women build passion into it, that it is in this part, it is their own duty to provide food. Yeah, the men may go out to go and look for money, to pay school fees, to get one or two things, but the duty to put food on the table, to go to the farm. So basically the women assume that that is their own role. And so as far as we know here, the youths and the women cannot be divorced from food production. If you remove them, definitely the men won't be doing more. The men cannot, 80% of the men here only go about to provide money for farming, but the women and the youth go to the farm themselves and do it with themselves. So they are inseparable from food production, as far as I know. And talking about the future here, Marian is on this platform. I saw her, Marian from Friends of the Earth International. She's doing a great job in our campaign against GMOs. I think that's a very big threat to future food production, because if we mortgage our future by embracing seeds from this multinational, then I don't think we have a future. But if we continue to fight Monsanto's and all these other companies, fight them, refuse to accept their seedlings, because when once you get one and you plant there, other natural herbs and food will not grow anymore. So our future lies in ensuring that the territory that is our own, that we secure it by whatever means, secure that territory that is our own, and refuse to accept any seedlings and whatever that comes from the multinational that want to buy our entire future. That if you want to drink a cup of water, you go and buy from them. If you want to eat rice, you go and buy from them. They take rent and royalty on seedlings that come from us and sell it back to us. We cannot survive as an indigenous ethnic nationality if we see that very important part of our life, our rights. If we allow that aspect to go into the hands of multinationals, then we are finished. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Celestine. Tirta, on the two questions?
Yes. The first point, of course, women in our region, northeast part of India, they have the greatest stake in developing or promoting the whole food system, starting from the agricultural activities. Women, they are part of in the every cycle of agricultural works in the family. We used to have from the implantation, plowing, then harvesting, food preparation. So in all the aspects of our life, women, they're part of these activities, not only in agriculture, also in other agri-based livelihood where they take part very actively and they have the greatest take on it. So like without women, we cannot actually imagine a food system that is more sustainable and institutionalized. Women, they have the greatest role in that. And secondly, as indigenous groups, we have to be really proactive and we need to take ownership how we can make the indigenous food system more sustainable and we can make it more institutionalized. And when we talk about institutionalized, it is like it should be embedded with the policies, national policies or local policies, so that these good practices of indigenous food system are replicated and scaled up in a larger, with a larger community or larger context. That is with the important inputs from the system, government system. So this is the enabling environment we need to create. So like without government intervention or without the policy level intervention, we cannot go for sustainable measures and institutionalized food system that will be more kind of long lasting in our community. So like as organization or as indigenous peoples activists, we have to create an enabling environment where policy also contribute to make it more sustainable in our lives. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tirta. Atama, the role of women and the youth on our and then our future, the future of the food systems, indigenous food systems.
Yes, we must recognize the role of women in our farms, in our field, in our gathering of food, whether it is in our garden, whether it is in the forest, or even whether it is in the forest reserves where it is our ancestral domain. So those are the indicators, I believe, that will withstand the test of time. And as long as we impart the traditional food recipes for our next generation, we can be content that this can be one indicator of our traditional practice of customary and also custodianship of our natural resources. I want to bring up something which is a local wisdom here in Borneo. So we say we cannot eat palm oil. We cannot put palm oil in our food and eat it as a staple food. We have to plant rice. We have to get food from and meat from the forest. So it is very clear that palm oil and other destructive monocrops have overtaken our traditional food system in our sustenance. And the result of this is the actual reports on sustainable development goals, whereby capitalized food sold in supermarkets to replace our natural resources is a no-go. No, this is already very glaring in the FAO report called the Wipala White Paper. We grow food for our sustenance, for our nutrition of our body, and for the well-being of our community. And the role of the women is very important to share the traditional knowledge from our ancestors on the finest herbs, the best preservatives, materials found in the traditional food that we have learned today, which is the boso. And I really want to recommend that heading towards the Global People Summit, and a recommendation to the United Nations is that UNESCO, the social and cultural agency of the United Nations, must partner with indigenous peoples to safeguard the recipes of our traditional food. And this becomes a new benchmark for the future of the planet. They have, the United Nations, they have for the past 20, 30 years, have come to our territories and told us, oh, you should reserve your forests for the future, for biodiversity, so later we can count the carbons and offer it to the industries and the corporates and the capitalists at the UNFCCC, and then they make all the money from digitalization and all those stuff. But we have to reverse that trend. We have to demand UNESCO provide security measures, and by recognizing our traditional food as world food, as natural food in nourishing for our indigenous people. If they can protect all our mountains, Mount Kilimanjaro, Mount Kinabalu as a protected reserve, they should now protect our traditional food. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Atama. Protection of our land is protection of our future. Kakay? Are you there, Kakay? You're on mute.
Thank you for the men who are here that well recognize the significant role of indigenous women on how we are keeping safe our food system from the planting, harvesting, and also on the preservations until the product is on our table. So it's good that indigenous women are now taking the significant role, not only in the fields of securing food system, but also on the securing on how the government policies will serve in the interests of the indigenous peoples on the preservation of our biodiversity and our environment. So indigenous peoples, together with the men, youth, and children, are come together from the local communities to national to international, so that we will say to the world that indigenous peoples are the one who are protecting and creating the free and democratic society in the future. That's all.
Thank you so much for that, Kakay. Rosa and then Dodo.
Yes, thank you. I just firstly want to acknowledge Kakai and also Beverly for being a good role model for us. Thank you very much for your words and your wise words. It's really good to hear from your sharing. And also for the colleagues, indigenous men who are here with us, thank you for your acknowledgement and recognition of the role of indigenous women as well. I just want to take the West Papuan kind of philosophies, the way we're looking at our land, and we always said that our land is our mother, and our land is provide life and food for us. So our land provide food production and always reproducing the food and life for us. And for us women in West Papua, our connection to the land is also part of our role as a woman to produce the food, help to produce the food that provide by our land, but also to reproduce the food, meaning that our mothers, our grandmothers, they're the one who reserve and have the knowledge about how we look after our land and how we get the food and how we produce and how we put the food on the table, just like what Kakai said. So they're the holder of the knowledge. The women are the holder of the knowledge of the food system, food chains, and that knowledge need to be passed down to their children's and grandchildren's, and that's exactly why we need women and children and young people work together with the men, because many times men always make their own decision without acknowledging women and children of the future. So I think this is something that we have to acknowledge then, and women or mothers always pass down their knowledge to the children, whoever their children, male or female, but that knowledge will be passed down, and then when they grow up, they will carry that knowledge. So I think in terms of the future of the food system and indigenous knowledge about food system, I think, and also the connection to the land, I think the knowledge is with the women. So women are very important, and young people or children are very important in terms of the sustainability of indigenous people's life. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Rosa, for that. And Beverly and Kakay are very happy. And all the women, indigenous women and women who join us, thank you so much for being with here and us today. And Dodo, I think Dodo, you have answered the questions on the women, on the youth, and the vision of a future food system. How do you see it?
Yeah, I think the future, the future is in our hand, in our indigenous, people hands. So it's important then we strengthen our solidarity and collaboration, and also support each others. It's very important, I think. Yeah, for the women role in our food system, I like to also add that in our work, with the community, we have this initiative called Community Rice Bank. Community rice bank is very critical for us to to have a food security, and the women they are taking leading role in organizing, managing this initiative. So this is one of the successful story that we have witnessed, and also we like to acknowledge that women play a very important role in our food system. They play important role in seed selection, saving, storing, and also sharing. They have this kind of a knowledge, knowledge that they pass on to the younger generation, youth, and also they other colleagues, other speaker mentioned that women play important role in they are making sure that the table is full of food, the husband, their children are well fed, so this is very important, as we need to acknowledge that as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Dodo, and thank you so much for everyone. If everyone could turn on their camera and give our speakers and our attendees a big round of virtual clap. Thank you so much for this wonderful, rich, and very inspirational discussion. And as Dodo said, and as all the speakers said, the future is in our hands. Our solidarity is our victory. So we are counting on every one of you here to join us and see us on September 21 to 23 on the Global People's Summit. Great presentations, great wisdom from all over our friends or colleagues all over the world, from different sides of the world, countries and territories. We want you to be with us in there September 21 to 23. Check on the links and how you could register, and please invite your friends, your loved ones, everyone in your community. You can do community watching if you want, if the health protocols allows. And we hope this is not the last. We would like to hear you again. We love to listen to your wisdom, listen to your stories, inspire everyone, the youth and the women, on what the future holds for indigenous food systems and indigenous people. So with that, I would like to end for now our discussions, and see you again on September 21 to 23. Thank you. Terima kasih. Maraming salamat.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Nice to see you, Do. Give
Thank
my regards
you.
to Paul and everybody.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you, Beverly. Thank you, Paul. Hello.
Nice to meet you,
Bye-bye.
Barosa.
Terima kasih.
Bye.
Thank you so
Yes,
much.
Celestine. Nice to see you.
Sama-sama.
Rosa, everybody. Thank you very much.
Bye.
Maraming salamat.
Rosa.
Gitang.
Maraming
See you.
salamat.
Bye.
Long live
Bye-bye.
Papua.
Celestine,
Long live
how are you?
Ogoni. Long
Still
live
Gitan,
Papua.
still here.
Long live
Goodbye, everyone. Thank you
everyone.
for your
Bye.
great sharing.
Great.
Bye, Tama.
Bye, Jiten.
Bye. Bye, Kakay. It's
Bye,
nice to
Jiten.
meet you, Kakay.
night. Kay Giselle.